We appreciate everyone joining us today on your Wednesday morning or afternoon, wherever you might be located. We'll go ahead and get started here. I'm going to do a brief introduction as people are still getting into the webinar. So hello and welcome everyone. This is our first installment of our 2026 Winter Lecture Series. I'm Dr. Audrey Thorsted, Director of Programming at the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library, or HMML, HMML as many people know it. If you're new to HMML, we're an international organization based out of Minnesota in the United States. And over the last 60 years, our purpose has remained the same: to preserve and share the world's handwritten past to inspire a deeper understanding of our present and future. Handwritten books or manuscripts are clues that document what humans over thousands of years thought important enough to share. Therefore, we photograph manuscripts around the world so their contents can be made available for centuries to come. We place a special priority on manuscripts located in regions endangered by war, political instability, or other threats. Preservation begins through partnerships with local libraries. These are agreements that allow HMML to take digital images of the manuscripts in their collections. Digitization is done entirely through local teams to whom we provide equipment, training, technical support, and payment for their work. We photograph everything in a collection because we just don't know what might be significant now or in the future. Copies of these digital images are given to the library that holds the manuscript, and another copy comes to HMML in Minnesota. HMML then employs catalogers and other staff to ensure that the digital images of these manuscripts are identified, supported for long-term access, and made freely available to the public on our website. Scholars from all over the world visit HMML both physically at our location at St. John's University and virtually in our reading room, which houses millions of photographs of manuscripts. Our work is solely funded by donations and grants. Please consider donating to HMML to help us continue the important work of preserving cultural heritage around the world. As HMML celebrates 60 years of operation, this year's Winter Lecture Series turns inward to our wonderfully hardworking and incredibly talented HMML team. Today, you will hear about the work that is largely done behind the scenes, so this is truly a special treat for us to get a sneak peek into the inner workings of HMML. I am delighted to introduce my three wonderful colleagues who you will hear from today. John Meyerhofer joined HMML in 2017 and is the Director of Information Sciences. He is a graduate of St. John's University with a degree in mathematics. He has a master's in Library and Information Science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. John works tirelessly on our systems to not only ensure that the technology is working, but also to ensure that the information is freely accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wayne Torberg is the Director of Digital Collections and Imaging at HMML since 2003, and this is during HMML's early stages into the digitization world. His team is responsible for storage, archiving, and backing up of all digital data, including scanning and digitizing microfilm, books, and art, as well as preparing the images for our online reading room. He supervises the technical aspects of all digitization projects around the world, including HMML's first digital preservation studio in northern Lebanon that Wayne helped to set up and establish. Finally, Dr. Catherine Walsh is our Director of Cataloging and Library Services and joined HMML's team in 2019. She has a BA in Art History and English and a Master's in Library and Information Science from Indiana University. She received her MA and PhD in Art History from University of Delaware. Dr. Walsh and her team help to organize and provide access to HMML's collections. She oversees the HMML's team of catalogers and curators in their work to standardize manuscript metadata so it's easily searchable in the online reading room. Now, before I turn it over to our three speakers, one final bit of housekeeping. There will be time for questions at the end. Please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box at any point during or after the presentation. You can open this Q&A box on the bottom of your Zoom screen. You may have to click the three dots that say More to find this button. We will get to as many questions as possible. If you'd like to ask a question to a specific speaker, please include the name of the speaker in your question. Now, without further ado, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the presentation. John, as our first speaker, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to share my screen here so we can get the PowerPoint up and get you guys slide control. Hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint.
Looks like Audrey, maybe on the other screen.
Are we seeing the...
Yes.
Okay, let me just exit and easy fix here.
Wonderful.
There we go.
Yeah, as Audrey said, my name is John Meyerhofer. I'm the Director of Information Systems here at Himmel, and I have the honor of kicking off today's presentation with a little kind of introduction. And then I'll turn it over to Wayne, and then we'll let Catherine speak, and then you'll hear from me again later in the presentation. So let's get started. Today, let's visit a library. Close your eyes if you want, but let's pretend we need to visit a library and do some research with handwritten books that we here at Himmel call manuscripts. In the city of Mosul, Iraq, there's a small library with handwritten manuscripts that have piqued our interest. And to see these manuscripts, our journey begins with a flight from Minneapolis's MSP airport to Paris, and then another flight from Paris to Erbil, Iraq. Assuming we can secure local transportation, we need to drive about 2 hours along dusty roads through multiple checkpoints controlled by different militias to the town of Mosul. If we're lucky enough, the locals help us find the actual entrance to the library, where we'll be welcomed by a local librarian, and our guide helps us negotiate access and permission to look at these precious books that we want to study. So you can open your eyes now, if you still have them closed. Yeah, I hope you're having good dreams or good thoughts. This is kind of an interesting thought experiment. Our journey from Minneapolis to Iraq. This is all hypothetical, of course, because the library that our example was talking about in Iraq no longer exists. It has been destroyed. Its rare materials may have been moved, but honestly, we don't know. You and I can't actually visit this library, even if we wanted to. Seemingly, we'll never be able to see these manuscripts again. But we've come to the plot twist in our story. Actually, you can still see them. You see, in 2012, Himmel had a partnership with the Syrian Orthodox Archdiocese of Mosul to make digital images of the manuscripts in their collection. Through the work of their local team and the work of Himmel staff, this library from Iraq has been, in a sense, recreated digitally and online. This library and its unique handwritten pieces of history are still able to live on. So today in this talk, we'll focus on what happens after the camera shutter button has been pressed. Today we'll look at how we at Himmel take these digital photos, preserve them, catalog them, and then make them findable and viewable by scholars and people around the world. Today, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look of the ordinary and extraordinary work that Himmel does in building our digital library. All right, next we'll turn it over to Wayne.
Hello, everybody. Check and see if this works. Yes, it does. Before there can be a library, there has to be information. And in our case, information is digital data. I receive, organize, and prepare the data produced by Himmel's projects. Himmel sends photographic equipment to various project sites for their various manuscript digitization projects. Right now, we've got over 30 active projects in sites operating in about 15 countries. Here's an old magazine ad for a personal computer that I actually owned in the early 1990s. This is an IBM compatible Office PC sold by Radio Shack. This cutting edge piece of technology cost me over $2,000 in 1990 money and could hold 40 megabytes on its internal hard disk drive. This is the latest model of digital camera that Himmel is using for preservation projects. Every time the shutter on this camera is clicked, it produces 40 megabytes of digital data. This data comes to Himmel on a continual basis. At first, it came to us on DVD discs. After receiving, labeling, sorting, and storing nearly 8,500 of these disks, we gave up and went to external hard disk drives. We now have about 850 of these external hard disk drives. Since 2003, over 600 terabytes of digital data has been collected by HMML. In addition to data that comes from overseas, we create a lot of digital data in-house. For example, our microfilm scanning projects every week produce between 20 and 30,000 digital images. That's an impressive amount of data, but it's not something you could honestly call a library. In fact, without a lot of organizational work, what you really have is a junk drawer. A virtual junk drawer. You all have one, right? It's where everything is if you can find it. The Post-it notes, the scissors, the tape measure, the charger for your phone, they're all in there somewhere if you can find it. Well, if you've got 400,000 objects in your virtual junk drawer, you have to have a plan to organize what you're going to do with all that stuff, and that's what I do. When data arrives at Himmel, the only thing we know about the data is what project we've received it from and how much of it there is. My goal is to specify what it's called, where it's located, and make sure we safeguard it. To that end, I scan all incoming data for viruses and malware. I make file counts and folder counts of all of our files and folders. By the way, we have 19 million individual unique image files. I determine the capture date for all the files so we know when they were taken. Then we record all the data to industry standard backup tapes. Then we store all of our tapes in our offsite storage vendor in Utah, where they are stored in a hollowed out mountain surrounded by hundreds of feet of granite. These actions safeguard the data that Himmel has collected. The next thing that I do are prepare the data so that my colleagues can actually make use of it. To this end, I create web-optimized versions of all 19 million images. I rotate them all into proper viewing orientation. Then I create little thumbnail versions of all the images as well. Then I run special software operations that generate a little text file that is in every folder of images that we have. This is a little data file that tells the web server how to properly sort and display the images. Here's what's in that little file. You can forget about it now. Then we upload all of our images to the web server, which is a large array of hard drives that IT services provides for our use and charges us for. Then I create a bunch of obscure mumbo-jumbo commands that are then run against the server to tell the server where the stuff is and how to deliver it to our customers. And then I create records. Records of everything we've got and everything I've done. I keep records for every object, every web version of every object, every thumbnail image, every backup tape, every hard drive, and every individual action taken on the data that has come to HMML. My digital asset management system has over 2.5 million records, more than the vHML online system itself. Now the data is organized, safeguarded, and loaded to HMML's web server, but it's still not a library. At this point, my colleagues get involved and the work begins.
All right, it's my turn now. So after Wayne works his magic, we can now find the images and recognize which images belong to which books. So we know a book exists. We're at that point. Imagine trying to sort things out without that careful organization. Hint, all of these pages all come from different books in Iraq, each of which is unique and contains different texts. Imagine trying to put them all together in some order. It would take you forever if Wayne's work hadn't been done. Still, the images are not meaningful and understandable. This is not equal to a physical book. It's just data. This is what that data looks like at its basis level. An image is just pixels. So we need to add knowledge to make the book usable and findable for people outside of HMML, adding depth and dimension to that dumb data. It's time for me and the cataloging team to step in and add our part to the story of this digital book, turning this into this. Someone may never hold this book again, so it's my job to make sure users can come as close as possible. The first step involves describing the images together as a set, as a book. We need to describe it so the user can recreate it in their minds. How big is it? How old? Where's it from? What's it made of? Now people can hold the book digitally. They can see these images assembled together into a single book-like object. They can flip the pages, looking from one to the next, comparing and backtracking, just like you might when you pull a book off your shelf at home and page through. But questions remain. What's in this book? Who will look at it? Why do they even want to read it? To breathe life into the book and help us answer these questions, we need help. I am lucky enough to work with an expert team of catalogers from around the world. Among them, they can read dozens of languages. They have devoted themselves to studying, learning, and understanding manuscripts. They can more easily read text in old handwriting that might be really difficult. They can compare the text they're looking at right now to the memory of thousands of texts they've seen before, and they know the tools to use to help them decipher the clues left behind by thinkers and writers of the past. Why does this expertise matter? Because this is a different kind of cataloging than might jump to your head when you think of a typical library catalog. These are unique, handwritten books that most people in the world have never seen before, and they usually come without roadmaps. Let's look at a page from a book, probably one that's familiar to most of you because it's required reading for many of us. In fact, this photo comes from a copy I read back in college. I'm dating myself a little bit here. Can you tell the title? The author? When it was published? Yes, because the modern title page is designed to give you this information very quickly and easily. Now let's look at an early print book, one from 4.5 centuries earlier. It's a little more confusing, right? The author's name is up here. It includes strange letters. For instance, a V form stands in for a U as we would know it. The title is in Latin, and the words are actually split across lines. So we have to put a little more effort into reading it. But it's still a title page. The printer was making a real effort to make you understand this book thing. Oh, here, whoops. Here, oh dear. Here's the first page of the manuscript I'll talk about today. One owned by the Chaldean Catholic Church in Al-Qush, Iraq. Uh-oh, no titles, no authors, no table of contents, So, where do we find this information? This is the first page of a text in the manuscript. It's got some clues for you, but you have to look really closely, even if you read the language, which I will admit I do not. This is Syriac, and it is not my forte. So thankfully I have help. Here is the author. Here is the title. So we're good now, right? No, because this manuscript calls the text Ketaba de Pushak Shmahe. Sorry for the mispronunciation, but that means Book of the Interpretation of Words. And then it includes a long preface dedicating it to a local Muslim ruler named Shams al-Din Yusuf. If our only information were what is written on the object, we would think this is a completely new text with no other copies. Luckily, Himmel's catalogers know a little bit more than I do, or a lot more. Because it turns out that this is a fairly common text, which starts actually 2 pages later. And you can see where the text actually starts here. 21 other copies of this Arabic Syriac dictionary by Elia of Nisibis exist in our collections. It's just presented in a very different way here, and it took a cataloger reading the clues to put this mystery together. And note that this is only one of 24 such identifications that had to be made for this one manuscript. We include the basics in our descriptions so that people like you or me can find and understand this book, but there's always more work to be done. The manuscript I've been sharing with you has been written about by a pair of brilliant scholars, Grigory Kessel and Yuri Arzanov, who had a lot more to say, writing more than 30 pages on this one book. Because these books are idiosyncratic and handwritten, you can't, yet, use some of the fancy new tools you've probably heard about to assist this process. No artificial intelligence or optical character recognition can catalog this book. The strangeness of the pages with lines going in different directions, stains, words crossed out like you see here. This means that AI will have a hard time even figuring out where the words are on the page. Here's just another cool and complicated example, this one from India. You also can't copy the data from records created by other libraries because it's unique. It takes a highly experienced, trained person to identify this. So let's return to the afterlife of our book. It used to be this, a physical book whose location is now unknown. This is just an image. And now it's a meaningful book, brought to life by what we now know about it. In a sense, our catalogers have provided information for you, stepping into the shoes of the librarian who you might have asked to help you find things in that original library. Now you can ask questions and get answers. You can say, I want to see books with cool images, or I want to see books with sermons or poems. What were people like me thinking in the 19th century? In the process, you learn even more. How is this book made? In this case, it was made in 2 parts, joined together, one earlier, one in 1856. And you can see that even the book itself incorporated parts from earlier manuscripts, right? So you can see a lot of the history just by looking at these images and knowing how they're made. So you can also ask other questions. What were people interested in so long ago? Big questions people ask about what it means to be human, how to speak and write and communicate to others, how to explain the stars in the sky and the natural world. All of these topics covered in this one manuscript. You can also start to relate this one book to other things, ideas that traveled and mattered to people in different places who spoke different languages, but were all interested in our shared humanity. The description we just created of this book can now talk to descriptions of other books, finding relationships and commonalities. And I'm always surprised by how global the world was before what we think of as the global age. But how do we make these connections when everyone has so many different ways of talking about the same thing? You may be familiar with this author, St. Augustine, best known for his Confessions or City of God, another book I read in college. Maybe you too. But what happens when each of us has a different way of naming this person? Think of your own name and how you might be called. I'm Catherine Walsh, but I'm also Dr. Walsh. Imagine if I lived in a place or time when I was identified by my relationships. Catherine, daughter of Mary. Or by where I'm from. Catherine of Indiana, then Catherine of Minnesota. Or by my profession. Catherine, the art historian. Or Catherine, the librarian. How do we know that all of these are simply me? How do we know that we're always talking about Augustine? When we catalog, we choose a single term that encompasses all the others so that users can find things no matter how they search. Without these connections and this data, something that can be lost even if it's right there. Someone may be looking for it and may never find it. Without knowing where it is and what it is, it might as well not exist. And now we have hundreds of thousands of these beautiful, unique, handwritten books that most people in the world have never seen. Some of them are physically lost, but they're still here digitally. Each of these books on the screen comes from a different library, country, and culture, yet they are all findable in our system together. Turning it over to John.
Wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. But let's wonder, where is this library that we've been talking about? How does anyone find, see, or read the book that Wayne talked about preserving? The one that Catherine just talked about, that her team recorded and cataloged. How is that object or book brought to life digitally? At Himmel, we've built a library, this online library that we call our Himmel Reading Room, or our vHimmel platform. So what happens when you visit the Himmel online library? Well, in many ways, conceptually, our online library can be much different than your experience when you visit a physical library that many of us are familiar with. The physical library has a physical place, it has a roof, walls, floors, and it exists only in one location. It may have limited hours when it's open. The Himmel library, however, doesn't require a library card or anyone can visit it anywhere around the world. The Himmel library is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, it's open right now. The physical library can be at risk for destruction, like the library in Mosul that we talked about. That's a perfect example of the dangers of physical loss. And sadly, we're seeing this in many of the other places that Himmel works, for example, in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Lebanon. There's many dangers for these physical objects. The Himmel library, however, at its core is a group of computers that we call servers. And however, these special computers, they all have backups, they all have redundancy, they all have monitoring and logging. And these things that we have on these servers all ensure that vHimmel continues to operate without interruption. And if the system does go down, we were able to quickly restore it. With computers, we also have the power that it's reproducible. So unlike a physical library, we have the ability at any moment, thanks in part to the preservation work that Wayne has described, that we can recreate the application or the whole library again. A physical library also takes a team of architects and construction workers and others to build. The Himmel Library also took a team, and there have been many staff, partners, and donors and funders involved with the current platform since inception in about 2015. I think we'd be here all day if I had to name them all. The physical library has books, that are organized on shelves, making them findable. The HMML library, however, also has books, but these are digital, not physical objects, and they're organized a little differently. But the power of our online library is that these objects can be found in many different ways. You can search for a word or a term you're interested in, like flowers, or sermons, or astronomy. You can also search for manuscripts or archival materials based on places, like Iraq, or Malta, or India. The physical library has a team of librarians and staff who all help the library function and provide services. The HMML library also has things that help the library function, but in the computer world, these aren't always people, but instead they can be little programs or pieces of software. So the software provides functionality by listening for actions by users as they use the library. When a user searches for the term like flowers, the software searches through all the metadata in the system, metadata that was added by Catherine's team of catalogers, and it finds just those objects with the term or word flowers. Or when a user views a manuscript's digital images, the software collects the image files that Wayne talked about preparing to present them in a way that allows users to zoom and virtually page through the book. The physical library is limited in size, and it can only have a number of books that it can hold in its library or on its shelves. The HMML library doesn't have those barriers or limitations. Currently, as Wayne said, we have over 19 million image files or 180,000 objects from around the world. So for a sense of scale, that's almost 50,000 more objects than the Art Institute of Chicago has available in their online library, and over 18 million more image files. I'm honored to speak today, and I'm excited that everybody who's here is wants to learn more about HMML and the things we're doing. And I'm glad that Catherine and Wayne were able to join me, and we can talk about the things that we do kind of in the back of the house here. A little bit more about me. I come from a family of educators. I have an aunt, an uncle, and both my grandparents, and both my parents are actually teachers, and they taught me the value of school and knowledge, and of course, the power of books. I still remember as a kid reading some of the titles on my grandparents' bookshelves, and I recognized some of them, but there was one in particular that was memorable. It might have been The Artful Drawing, but I remember at the time as I opened the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, I was surprised to see it inscribed in the front cover by my grandmother's perfect cursive handwriting, with a note that said, "Purchased in Canterbury, England," and it had a date. Steve Jobs once said, "Books give us the ability to read what Chaucer or Aristotle or even what Augustine of Hippo wrote without an intermediary in the way." Books are phenomenal things. They get right from the source to the destination without anything in the middle. So from Canterbury, England, to Minneapolis, where my grandparents lived, Chaucer's writing transcended time and distance. So with that book, I could reach back in time and read Chaucer's words, as Jobs said, without anything in the middle. And I think at its heart, this is part of what HMML's mission is too. HMML creates a connection between these communities where we work, between the authors, the rare, the old, or ancient knowledge, so that all of us can read the words again without anything in the middle. So that's the end of our presentation. I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. My details are up on the screen. If you wish to send an email to me asking any further questions, I can pass it on to the speaker. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I will come back. Let me see. Stop sharing. Okay, here we go. So, as a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Again, it's at the bottom of the screen. We already have some great questions. So I'm going to start out here with a broad question aimed at everybody. So whoever wants to jump in and answer, please do so. So the question from Jason, the collection, storage, preservation, and analysis of literally millions of pieces of human history is incredibly hard work. It feels never ending, at times heartbreaking. In this work, what keeps you up at night and what keeps you going in the morning? Great question.
So I think what keeps me up at night is how much you miss, right? Everybody feels that. No one can get, you can't save it all. For every collection we save, there are many that we can't save because there's limited people and limited funds and limited time. But what keeps me going is that incremental progress, how each piece that you do save can make a huge difference. Just this week, my curator, who actually I want to give a nod to, Dr. Josh Mugler, who helped me identify all the parts of that text, which I couldn't read on my own. Just this week, he was looking at a collection from Gaza and he found just dozens of unique texts in there that there's no other copies known in the world, and it represents this culture, this one specific place and this one specific culture and way of thinking and responding. And this collection was almost lost, right? We got it a year or two after it was photographed, after unbearable hardship, right? And Josh cataloged it and found these amazing things that can make a real difference in how people think about these people and their lives and why they matter. And that helps me keep going, right? That you just never know when you're going to stumble across that thing that really moves you and that really brings these people to life as people who had culture that mattered.
Anyone else want to jump in?
I can. I think from my perspective, like because I support the systems that Himmel uses and the websites. I like what keeps me up at night is to make sure that they stay up and they stay running and that people can access these materials. Um, yeah, that's one thing that I'm always kind of worried about and want to make sure that things stay up and running and people can access things.
Wayne, we have a photography question next. So we have a question. When the manuscripts are photographed, do you photograph every single page, even if it's blank, so the patrons are confident that no data is missing, or do you put a tag stating 5 blank leaves, for example?
We do both. Generally, if there's a small number of blank pages, which is usually the case with uh, beginning and end leaves of a book, we just shoot them, and then people can page through the book virtually, and the text begins at some point. If a book has like dozens of blank leaves in it for whatever reason, we may just simply put a placeholder image in the image set that says, 20 blank pages between here and here. The secret is, or the goal is not to introduce doubt into the viewer or the reader's part, wondering if there is something there that they're missing or that we missed in the photography. So we acknowledge the fact that, yes, we saw that there were 25 blank pages, but we just didn't photograph them because they're blank. Now, if they had anything on them, a stamp, a handwritten note from a librarian, or even some sort of a penciled scrawl, it would be photographed because that could be important in some context.
Thank you. Another Wayne question. How often do you include a color chart with a scan? I noticed the images Catherine showed were in color, but the ruler to the left of the page is in black and white.
Well, it's not actually in black and white. The ruler is it's a neutral gray scale from a thing called a QP card, which contains a black, a midtone, and a white. Um, the color things that you are probably thinking about are these targets that are used often to calibrate monitors and create color profiles for images. They're less useful for field work because the cameras themselves are producing a specific output profile, usually sRGB, and the goal is to get the neutral point, the gray patch, to be absolutely neutral in the photography and not to blow out the white patch. If you overexpose the image, the white patch will go to pure white. And images or image information that's pushed into pure white cannot be recovered. It's gone. So we have parameters to set up to not overexpose that white patch. And since the white patch in the ruler is usually brighter than the brightest thing in the manuscript page itself, if we don't overexpose the white patch, we can't overexpose anything in the on the book page. Um, if you can get the gray patch in the middle to be equal amounts of red, green, and blue light, then basically the color of the rest of the image will fall into place based on the output profile of the camera itself. And I could go on for like a week, but I'll stop now.
Thanks, Wayne. We have a question for Catherine about catalogers. The question is, how do you find catalogers who have language skills to do this work? Some of these languages are very ancient, and there aren't exactly large numbers of people with these skills, plus the library science knowledge.
It is challenging. We advertised for the position and we hired the best applicants, of course, but Himmel is in a really fortunate position where we end up working with ultimate professionals in the field, right? We get all of my cataloging team, they all have PhDs and they all studied the manuscripts and languages as their career. That means that we teach the library science side of things to them when they come here. And we also hire professional librarians like myself and one of my assistants, another professional librarian, to standardize, make sure everybody follows rules, etc. Now, many of these languages, Arabic, for instance, I don't read Arabic, um, but it is incredibly popular and well read around the world. So that also helps that the community is often larger than we think. Including Syriac. I mean, it is not a dead language. There are people who are born speaking Syriac, and the language that I showed you. You're right that it is in the United States, it's harder to find somebody than somebody who reads English, but it's still possible. Um, and that said, my catalogers often encounter languages that are close to something that they learned, but not what they learned. So, for instance, Josh catalogs something in Chagatai. He has not specifically studied Chagatai, but it's related to Turkic languages, and he knows Arabic and other Turkic languages, and so he can puzzle it out much better than somebody who's never even heard of Chagatai would be able to. So that also helps.
It's nice that we can draw on people all over the world and really draw on expertise. We don't limit ourselves, which is really nice.
That is
Um,
true. I've had
mhm.
catalogers in Lebanon, in Italy, in Egypt, in Poland and Italy. Like, I mean, people all over the world who have worked for Himmel.
Mhm. Another question for you, Catherine. I'm interested in controlled vocabularies. How do you go about building a controlled vocabulary with regards to certain countries? For example, texts from Malta related to Malta.
That's a great question. So the short answer is there's lots and lots and lots and lots of rules that you follow in order to try to be as specific and careful as possible. The rules don't always consider the details of cultural usage, and so Malta is a great example because Malta is an incredibly multilingual place where they speak Maltese and English and Arabic has a history and Italian. And so the question of what name to use for somebody is a very fraught question in a place like that. And there's no perfect answer for any, like, you can't say, okay, we're going to use English names for everybody because that won't be right. You can't even say we're going to use alt Maltese names for everybody because that won't be right. So ultimately, you have to consider each thing on a case by case basis, and you have to really consult the experts. That's one of the benefits that I have from working with the people that I do and having these partnerships that we do. Our director of the Malta Study Center, Daniel Gullo, has very close relationships with librarians and archivists in Malta and in Italy who he consults with very routinely. What would you use? How do you describe this? What language would you prefer? What terms would you prefer? And I think that is greatly helpful. Do we still make mistakes? Yes. Cataloging is iterative and it's always about updating to meet current cultural goals and norms and fixing mistakes and problems from the past. But we just do our best.
Great question. So I think John might be able to answer, Catherine might be able to answer. So you do great work. Thank you. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about your implementation of the Triple IF and the policies around viewing images within the reading room. Is this negotiated with each individual library? And is there a desire to have access to external viewers?
Yeah, great question. So the contracts are typically negotiated on a couple levels. We have a registration system within VHML. So images can be either open to everyone, they don't have to register, or images can be available when somebody registers. About beyond that, though, Reading Room was designed to be more of a closed system. IIIF historically has been an open API so that you could take images using IIIF from one institution and view them from a different institutional's person's website. So you could kind of not share those images. You're not actually moving the images. You're just viewing them from another an institution's website. But VHML or our VHML platform was designed in such a way that we don't allow that. And again, that was as a result of the negotiations that we've had with our partners. As you might expect, a lot of our partners are a little bit more protective of some of their materials, not wanting them to be used in inappropriate ways. And so it was a way for us to still allow access in the VHML platform, but and still get those images, get them digitized so that we can have them available for people to view. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, it has a very big, a lot to do with what is deemed ethical about open access. When it comes to our own images, they're all open. Anything that we own physically in Collegeville, we put those up unregistered. Anybody can see them anywhere in the world and use them. And some of our partners have decided to follow that model. For instance, I think the Austrian National Library, who we've just signed a contract to digitize their microfilm, they want them to be open. But many of our partners have a different history and a different experience with others taking or using their things. And for us, the most ethical thing we can do is to follow their wishes, whatever those are.
Yeah, it really is about partnerships for us. And we have our third winter lecture series, the final one in March, is actually all about partnerships. So please come back for that if you're interested. A question for Wayne. Are there any colors that the camera cannot capture? Thinking particularly about gold leaf or illumination, are there any things that are a challenge for the photographers?
Well, our lighting system for lighting a book to be photographed is a fairly basic copy stand type lighting system with two lights, one on each side, that are angled at a 45-degree angle to the copy itself. And as far as gold, you can get some reflectivity from the gold depending on the shape of the page. Many pages aren't exactly flat, so they might be a bit rumpled, which means that bits of the gold will pick up the light and shine the way that we expect gold to shine. As far as color gamut, color science is kind of complicated, but I won't get into the details. But most of the colors that are within manuscripts that we photographed are within the gamut of the camera's ability to record realizable color ranges, which is sometimes called a color space, often defined by an internationally known piece of software called an ICC color profile. I've written laborious blogs about this that no one cares about, but the fact is that most of our books are essentially whitish to light brown pages with dark brown to black ink, and then some decoration that may involve certain colors, none of which are usually colorful enough to be outside of the operating gamut of the camera. Now, our human vision can see a much greater range of color than pretty much anything can reproduce. Your eyes can respond to purities of color that cannot be reproduced with most inks, paints, pigments, or things you normally encounter in nature. Um, Gold is an especially challenging thing because people expect gold to flicker, to kind of change. Um, if you're reading an illuminated manuscript, say a book of hours from centuries ago that has gold elements applied to the pages, as you turn the pages and the light hits the page at a different angle, different parts of the page will often kind of twinkle and shine as it moves with your hand. The problem with a static image of a book is that it's static, so it doesn't move. So you don't get that twinkling effect that sometimes people want. Now, when I photographed the St. John's Bible, my job was to try to make that twinkling effect happen, even though the page couldn't move. So that required a wholly different apparatus to make that happen. But there are ways to enhance gold. You can put white reflector cards above the book and see if you can bounce some white into the gold. Or sometimes, as I have done for publication, you can select the gold in Photoshop and just give it a little kick in the software. uh, and in that kind of retouching work. So
Perfect. And I think we've had some great questions. I'm gonna end on one that sort of looks forward. And this might be a Wayne question, might be a John question. Catherine, I'm sure you can chime in as well. So Himmel has shifted from microfilm to the digital medium. The question is, are we concerned that someday that will be replaced by something, and are we prepared for the next medium after digital photography?
um, well, oddly enough, we just had a magazine come out where that sort of a progression was the highlight of the text. It was about digitizing microfilms, and the line that I wrote was microfilm was never, or manuscripts were never meant to be microfilm, because when manuscripts were being written by hand, nobody thought that you could put little tiny images of the pages on a strip of film and have an entire manuscript on a little reel of film, or a fiche that could be the size of an index card. And then the article goes on to talk about how the microfilm was never meant to be digitized because they didn't think about digitization. It didn't exist. It was an analog world, and when the technology came around that allowed the analog medium to be digitized, well, then we started to digitize the analog medium, of which we still have quite a bit of analog microfilm at Himmel, which we are steadily scanning. Um, if you know the future, it really isn't sort of the future, it's sort of the present, isn't it? So to me, it's kind of the acknowledgement that the unknowable is going to show up. And there will be technology that will take the data into a new direction. And our job is to make sure that that data just makes that trip and doesn't get altered or changed, so that the meaning of what it is doesn't change. Um, a long time ago, I blogged about Apple and their new devices and how they keep inventing new things that we didn't know we wanted until we saw it for the first time. And I think the line I used was, when the next thing happens, I expect it to be something I never expected. So that's my take on it.
I like that. I like ending on that. That's a great way. Himmel's constantly looking to the future, but also knows how uncertain and unexpected it is. So we'll hopefully rise to any challenge that comes our way. So thank you, you three speakers, Catherine, John, and Wayne, for such a great journey into sort of the back end of Himmel and how we bring digital images to life and allow them to be searchable and loadable and zoomable. And as you can see, the work of building an extraordinary, ordinary digital library really takes many hands, talents, skills, care from all those working behind the scenes. And once again, I've seen a couple questions about how can I register for the reading room. Himmel's online reading room is freely available online all the time for everyone. You may need to register, but registration is free, and you will be able to access all our manuscripts online. So I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us for this first installment of the Winter Lecture Series. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us. I want to encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter and magazine that Wayne was just speaking about. The magazine is digital, so you can go and look at it on our website, but we'll also send it to you in the post if you like receiving mail. You can stay up to date with all our events and happenings at Himmel. Our next lecture will be on February 25th, the same place, same time, with one of our curators, Dr. Josh Mugler, who's Himmel's curator of Eastern Christian and Islamic manuscripts. Again, the lecture is free, but please register so you can receive the Zoom link. And finally, upon exiting the screen, you will be prompted to take a very short survey. If you have time, please fill this out. It helps us create programming that is enjoyable for you. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you in 4 weeks' time.